Hello, everyone. We had an abbreviated intro. I'm not used to how short that is yet. Brad's usually manning that, but Brad is out in his swimwear, sipping Mai Tais on a beach somewhere, not worried about us. But you have Austin and I tonight, and hopefully that'll be enough for you. It is Monday night. That means it is the IDP Heat Seekers here on Roto Heat Fantasy. Austin, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I just got back from a late vacation myself, but couldn't miss on Monday night. It was we got a good show lined up for you guys tonight. How was yours?
Yeah, we're going over. Well, everything's a blur. Puppy, bunch of kids that are young, and activities and crazy stuff going around and around, and the dog wanting to get up at 4 to go use the bathroom and then not go back to sleep is. I'm used to early, but that's a little bit early for me. So,
Yeah,
lack of sleep, work, all that fun sort of stuff. But August is sort of the get ready time in the NFL. It's get ready time for kids with school and everything popping up. So it's just busy, busy, busy. But we're going to keep being here live on Mondays up until the start of the season. I think the last week we're doing is the 29th, which seems weird, but including this, it's only 5 shows away because the 5th is Labor Day, I believe, and the start of the season is that Thursday officially. So
yeah.
it is coming up about a month away.
Well, speaking of which, we I know last time we kicked off the show with some news. I don't know if if you have anything. Well, not you guys, but if you have anything this week, or if there's anything you want me to talk about. But it obviously training camp going on this week. Lots happening in the NFL. Anything that's caught your attention besides the big news? That you already know what that is. Anything else besides that, or care to talk about that, or want to save that for the offensive guys that do these shows?
Yeah, we usually don't get a whole lot into that
Yeah,
um, on here, which everyone sort of knows, and it's not really decided, I don't think, until Roger Goodell. We're
it's
talking about
true.
Deshaun Watson, of course, until
Hmm.
good old Roger has his say. And
It's true.
I have a feeling he'll probably try to do something more, but his ability to do that might be hampered anyway. So, um,
Definitely be interesting.
yeah, I'm trying to think here about because I saw something that I know we're going to get to later as far as news, because I don't want to rehash stuff we're going to be talking about anyway. Maurice Hurst, he was more of a depth piece, but he did all right on the 49ers defensive line. He's out for the year. He tore his bicep, so that's not overly IDP relevant, but in terms of team defenses, sort of which we had talked about prior, that's just a depth hit, and you don't like to see that too early in the season, and of course, ever. But there hasn't been a whole lot of big news. It's not on the defensive side of the ball, offensive contracts, suspensions being handed down, et cetera, et cetera. But nothing crazy on the
Yeah.
defensive side that I've seen.
I did see J-Ron Curse went down for a minute today. Didn't look like it was anything too serious, but he wasn't able to put any pressure on his leg. It looked like maybe he just kind of overextended it. It didn't look like it was anything too serious, but I did make note of that.
I'm just scrolling through here. Again, we need to hold music or something like that. The one big piece I saw we'll get to anyway. So we're going to dive into it. If you guys got questions about anything you've seen in the news, stuff that you haven't seen that you still have questions on anyway, please let us know. We're open to questions. We'll get towards those at the end of the show here. But of course, tonight we're talking about risers and fallers in the IDP world. We just had our update to our rankings at rotoheat.com across all our rankings for that matter, whether it's best ball, offense, defense, rookies, all that beautiful stuff. Start of the month, and we're going to be updating those more frequently as the season goes on here, so you can sort of see what happened over there. But we're really talking about sort of for this season with the risers and fallers, not really doing it from a dynasty perspective, because for the most part, with the exception of rookies, maybe you're not seeing a ton of that stuff change from the dynasty point of view. The first few weeks of camp matter much more for what you're hearing about redraft stuff than you do for dynasty. So, looking at what we had here for risers and fallers, one of them that I put on there was Grant Delpit in terms of a riser. So he is what's going to be his second year playing. It's going to be his third year technically in the league. He was drafted in the second round of 2020, but he missed that entire first year. Played 15 games last year. He did all right. It was nothing to write home about, but he had 66 total tackles, 43 solo, 3 tackles for a loss, a sack, 1 interception, a couple pass deflections. But he had showed well towards the end of last year, and of course they drafted him where they drafted him to be a starter for that team. Had that unfortunate start to his career and had to work his way back, but he was, again, a high draft pick out of a great LSU team coming out of college. And it kind of sounds like it's going to be him and John Johnson III, who had been a signee a few years ago from the Rams, is what they're hoping for. I guess what I'm looking for here is Austin. He was a guy that some people going into last year, and he didn't start off too hot, of course, still coming back from injury. People weren't very high on. I got him in the free agent wire in a couple of leagues, but I think he has a real chance to be a playmaker like he was in college. He clearly has good instincts and had that great athletic ability. I think it's just taken him a little bit more time than people might be used to coming back from injuries, quite frankly, because we see some of these guys come back from injuries. You're seeing it in the news now about James Robinson's not going to be on the PUP list. Travis Etienne's looking good out on the field. Everything, people see these short time frames, these turnarounds, and they get excited and they get alternatively upset when they don't see it from other players. So what do you think that a guy like Grant Delpit has to offer for teams getting him probably later in drafts than they should be?
Yeah, well, I think you're getting good value on Grant Delpit if you are getting him later in the draft than you think you probably should, because here's the deal. Grant Delpit's first year, obviously, he was injury riddled. He was coming off of an injury out of LSU, but he was one of the more highly touted safeties when he came out in his class. I mean, we're talking, in the ranks of, some of the top safeties that we've seen, in these safety classes. So he was regarded as one of the best safeties in his class. Obviously, he got drafted like that by the Browns. Unfortunately, his first year in the league, he just never really got to see the field the way that we all probably hoped. I drafted Grant Delpit coming out of college just because I thought, man, this is going to be like, I knew I would probably have to wait for the injury stuff to clear up, but I thought, man, this is something that's going to turn into something big. And then, the problem that you see and, people need to realize is these are still young guys trying to figure out the game. And especially when you're not on the field, that makes it that much harder to do. When you're not on the field and active, from the strength and conditioning standpoint to a schematic standpoint to just a game speed standpoint, everything, it makes it really difficult for these guys to catch on the way that you think that maybe they should without that. And so Grant Delpit was a guy that I think just that first year, the injuries really killed his progress. And then I thought he was in the doghouse a little bit with that coaching staff there for a minute. I wasn't really sure, what was going on there. It gave me some uncertainty. We saw Ronnie Harrison. He was able to play some pretty good football there in place of Grant Delpit when he was out, but it looks like he's been pushed down the depth chart. So I'm kind of intrigued by that a little bit. And I hope Delpit is able to just stay on the field. That's the key for him. As long as he's able to stay on the field and stay healthy, he was able to flash and show that he could be a productive safety in the league. And so now the guys who took a chance on him, and if you waited on him long enough, you're going to cash in for it. If you didn't wait on him, it's a good chance that you could find him on the cheap in your league, either on the wire or, maybe if you're in a startup, this is a guy you could target in the later rounds who could really pay off for you.
I was on mute there, and I'm trying to search here because I do, and you can find this online too if anyone's looking for it, but you can find Sleepers ADP. They update it through spreadsheets, and it doesn't go all the way to, forever. Of course, there's certain amounts that they don't have on here, but looking at a guy like him, you can find, ADP or as far as rankings all over the place, but he's not within the first 35 defensive backs being taken right now on Sleeper, which is, the most up to date. I don't have MFL on all that sort of stuff. So again, one site, it's more geared to Dynasty with a younger, sway towards it because, rookies usually get ranked higher on Sleeper. But even if you go over to like redraft rankings currently from Fantasy Pros, Grant Delpit's being listed at 43 for safeties, and he's behind guys like Terrell Edmonds, someone that I would not take ahead of him. So, you're getting great value down there in the 40s. Even if he was in the 30s, I think you'd be getting a decent value on a guy. It's probably more about where he should be going because he hasn't had that sort of breakout year. But if you're reaching for someone at the end of a draft, I think he's a great pick, especially with semi-related that news about quarterback situation in Cleveland, where if he is going to be there for most of the season, and at the moment, latest news that we have, he may be, that offense is in theory going to be much better than it has been, and then that secondary is going to be getting more work with teams having to throw against them.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right. Well, we are going to move on, and another guy here that I had listed. So behind the scenes, Austin and I both, threw some guys on here that we were both interested in, and another one that's been moving up, and how much of it has to do with early camp news, how much of it has to do with coaching staffs just making moves and trying to motivate people. We'll see. But Nick Vigil, linebacker for this year, the Arizona Cardinals. So he was in Cincinnati, of course, for a number of years, went to the Chargers for a year, went to Minnesota last year, and, in spot starts, he did really well for them if you picked him up off of waivers. Signed with the Cardinals. It was kind of interesting. It's almost like they swapped. Kendricks was the one that was there. Jordan Hicks, who was on Arizona last year, and then Vigil wasn't a real swap, but it almost feels that way. And there's a lot of news coming out that it looks like he might actually be one of the starters at linebacker this year. They're messing around more anyway with Simmons, sort of in that role that he played in college with a safety sort of linebacker hybrid, and of course, hopefully, Zavin Collins would be other linebacker there. And Vigil's a guy that, by and large, unless you're in deep leagues, isn't being drafted at all. I'm not saying go out and draft him right now necessarily either, but if you're going to be looking for someone at the start of the year because injuries hit, or leave a linebacker till the end of your draft and see who you can pick up off of waiver wires, he's a guy to mention, because I think towards the end of drafts, if you're having deep redraft IDP leagues, I know there's probably not a ton of those out there, he's a guy that, if this continues, is going to be worth drafting, because he will get you tackles when he's on the field. Seasons where he's started double-digit games, he's had 79, 84, 111, and 85 combined tackles. And he's not getting you a ton of other stuff, a couple tackles for a loss. If you're in a big play league, probably not. But in tackle leagues, how do you feel about taking a shot at him towards the end of the draft based on sort of the news we're getting out of camp here?
Yeah, he feels like a rotational piece right now at this point, although I could see him being rotated in. I'm curious to see what the Cardinals will do with their defense. It's been very peculiar to me how they have placed the players that they have, and the formations that they ran, where they put guys. And Zavin Collins obviously didn't really get any significant playing time his first year in the league, and now we'll see him in year two. And you would think that a guy that they took in the first round, I think, if I'm not mistaken, around 19th overall or 16th overall, whatever it was, he's going to find a way on the field somehow or another, whether that's, I don't know if they have him rushing off the edge. I think that may be better suited for him, but it seems like they're really determined to have him in the middle of the field. So I'll be interested to see how that works for him. Obviously, this discussion is about Nick Vigil and not Zavin Collins, but, I think that all kind of ties together. Nick Vigil, he's more of your traditional linebacker. Maybe they move Zavin around. Maybe they move Isaiah Simmons around a little bit. And then maybe he's able to find a path towards kind of the middle of the defense where he can get some significant or meaningful, not significant, but maybe just meaningful snaps where he's able to generate at least some kind of fantasy relevancy for you in terms of IDP scoring.
Yeah, and it's almost like they switched to a cheaper version of Jordan Hicks with the hope of, all right, let's see, last year we wanted Collins to beat out Hicks. That was the whole thing throughout all of camp, and Hicks just didn't go away. Collins didn't really play much at all last year. Hicks had a great season. And it's sort of like, all right, we're going to go with a slightly cheaper version, and you guys, hey, another year in the system. Let's see what we can do here. But it still is that veteran safety valve of a guy that has produced when he's been on the field, and he's not going to make huge mistakes and, cost you the game, but he's also not going to be that big presence that you're hoping one of your former 2 first-round linebackers is going to be on the field for you. And I think it does sort of play into, when you're talking about the defense, and just interesting to see how it'll play out. Jalen Thompson is a guy who really broke out last year, and you had on your list here for people that are rising again. Is this something where you kind of see, of course, Buddha had a down year for Buddha standards a little bit. But those standards are quite high. Do you sort of see this being a split between the two of those again, where they're both going to be valuable, or do you see at this point maybe Thompson starts taking over a little bit more as a guy to own there based on the amazing year he had last year?
No, I think Thompson gets a lot more action thrown his way just for the simple fact of how good Buddha is. Guys are going to have to, the teams are going to scheme away from Buddha. We've seen that. We've seen guys get added value just because they're targeted more often. Jalen Thompson held his own though. He did really well. Did well in coverage. I owned him on one of my teams. I say owned him. Sorry. I actually mean I had him on one of my rosters, and so I had him, and I was really impressed with him. So usually when I roster somebody, especially somebody that I'm seeing something, I'm like, I'm going to take a shot on this guy, and I was able to grab him off of waivers, and I actually watched him play. And he was all over the place. He does a lot of things really well. He's good in coverage. He's able to move all over the field, which is really great, and it's a great fit for that defense. And he's a willing tackler. He's able to make big plays in the backfield. He's fast enough. He's athletic enough. So he's a good, solid player, and that's why he made this list on one of my risers at safety is Jalen Thompson. He's a young guy, and I think he will have some redraft value this year for sure.
So I know that we're talking mainly redraft here, but one of the interesting things, and again, this is mainly me just reading between the tea leaves a lot, which is hard to do and dangerous, but with the talk of Simmons playing more sort of that safety hybrid role, Thompson's a free agent at the end of this year. And if he has another really good year, he's going to command a lot of money to a team that already has quite a bit of money just tied up. I mean, Kyler with that new contract, Hopkins is getting paid money. There's just places all over and other things that they need to improve upon other than that secondary. It makes me wonder if they're trying to see, all right, maybe not this year necessarily, but is Simmons going to be able to play safety if we need him to or want him to in the future? If we decide, all right, maybe he doesn't pan out as a linebacker like we thought, is he going to be able to move back there if we need him to? Because I didn't check Buda Baker, and I probably should have too. But I found that interesting, that contract price on the free agent, because he's going to be an unrestricted free agent. Are they going to franchise tag him? What are they going to do with Thompson if he has another year like that?
Yeah, it's a big gamble if you're the Cardinals. It is an interesting conversation to have. Is Marquise Brown on contract, or is he going to demand a contract after this season as well?
I will check that too after I check Buda. Buda's under contract for 2 more years after this, although, I mean, it's pretty easy to get out of it if they want to. But, again, he's a guy that's already under contract.
Sure. Yeah, so it's just an interesting conversation because if you have a safety that's playing well, who understands the system, seems to be a good schematic fit for what you have going on. I just think it's a big risk to, I mean, on one hand, it's like, okay, our safety's a dime a dozen. Maybe some could argue, although, we see talented safeties like last year's draft class. I had Richie Grant pegged as one of the, my favorite safeties in that draft. The kid that went to Jacksonville, can't think of his name right now, Andre Cisco from Syracuse was a guy that I pegged as like, this guy is really talented. He just jumped off the film to me, and then he just didn't ever really get a shot. So it's kind of interesting. You would think those guys would be able to go right in and get action, and that's just not the case. So there's more to it than just what you see on film. So it's interesting to me that they would move a guy and then take one of their line, like sort of, I don't know, what do they call it? Stealing from Peter to pay Paul. So you're going to take from your linebacker corpse and you're going to add him to safety, and you really don't know what you have. I mean, maybe he does get used at safety more. Maybe they do try to test the water and see what he's able to do. Isaiah Simmons we're talking about, of course. But I just don't like it. I think it's risky, but based on, again, kind of how the Cardinals run their defense and some of the things that they do, there's a lot of head-scratching moments where I'm going, what are the Cardinals doing? This makes no sense. So would it surprise me? No, it wouldn't. Would I suggest it or recommend it? Probably not. I would probably recommend trying to keep Jalen Thompson on that squad. Although, the kind of money that he's going to fetch, I think it'll depend on the market. And I get it. Maybe they just replace him and move on.
And Marquise Brown, they option, whatever, I can't think of the right word. They exercised his option. So he's under contract through 2023 with that. But yeah, I mean, contract's going to be due coming up on that too. So just a guy that, Kyler's not going to want him to get rid of. They just traded a first-round pick for it. You would think they'd be re-signing him. Mm-hmm. And there's other spots in that defense where they could use help. I mean, cornerback's a spot that they've invested in a little bit, but they don't have a ton of depth there. Their defensive line, Zach Allen performed well last year. J.J. Watt, bless his heart, I think he's just got so much wear and tear with the Texans. It seems like his body breaks down every year, and it's not something you like to see, but it makes you think, is he getting to the end of the road? The defense as a whole just feels like they got some big names, but it just doesn't feel like it's a whole unit, really.
Yeah. Yeah, they need a lot of help. You're looking at the outside linebackers too. Their outside linebackers are pretty abysmal.
All right, we're gonna keep moving on to make sure we get through as many of these as we can. Cameron Curl, another safety, is the next name you had on here for one of your risers. A guy that came on a lot more last year, and of course they let Landon Collins go, so it sort of looks like it's going to be him and Bobby McCain for the two guys at safety there. But what are you liking about Cameron Curl, and what are you hearing that makes you feel comfortable with bumping him up here for the season?
I like the athletic profile, obviously, for Cameron Curl. His, when he got a crack at it, when there was the injury and he was able to go in and be the starter, Landon Collins was out. He performed really well his rookie season. He showed some things on tape and in the stat box that I thought were really impressive. He's a guy that racks up a lot of tackles. He's a guy that flies around the field, and he's a guy who's not really a liability in coverage. So he's a guy who I really like. I think he's going to have to be one of the big playmakers on this defense. The good thing for him is he's got one of the best, in my opinion, defensive lines in the NFL. It's certainly one of the most deep defensive lines. With this, they've got the addition here of Fedarian Mathis, and then you've got Montez Sweat, Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, and Chase Young. I mean, that's a solid starting four. And then you've got some guys behind that you can rotate in. So them being able to generate pressure up front, I think is going to help a lot with their being able to make plays. Kendall Fuller, Bobby McCain, those two guys are going to have to be big too. But I think really the main guy in this secondary that you want to target is Cameron Curl. He's got all the tools that he needs, and he looks like he'll be a really great player this year in redraft and for dynasty purposes.
It makes me really sort of wonder with that team. I fell for it last year thinking, oh man, they had another linebacker. They got that great defensive line. They got the secondary. They got some useful cornerbacks. It's just going to be a great defense. And of course, stuff sort of just fell apart for various reasons. The linebackers weren't nearly as deep as they thought. Jamin Davis just didn't really show up and be. They knew he was a little bit of a project. He was a highly athletic player, he still is, but it just didn't come along like most of the linebackers last year for the rookies to be useful year one. Defensive line got hurt. They played a lot of three safeties last year, and of course Collins isn't there, and they got Belton is not the one. Percy Butler, is that the guy that they drafted? I think they drafted him.
Yeah, Percy Butler.
So they took it was like a fifth-round pick or something. Yeah, they don't have a ton of depth there. It makes me wonder really what they're going to do because they haven't really done anything with their depth. They have a whole bunch of late or undrafted rookie linebackers that they took, not only to help with depth, but special teams. It sounds like Chase Young might not be ready to start the year, which I didn't throw him on the list there, but if you want to talk about a faller for redraft purposes, I like him a lot, Dynasty, but I'm not trusting him this year coming back from injury. Admitting that, hey, he wasn't completely sure of himself because he put too much pressure on himself. He was forcing it last year. You put all of that sort of stuff together. Chase Young where he's being drafted for redraft, I'm not really on him. We're not done with, and this was, again, not on the list, but it almost makes me feel like I'm not falling for this again. If this defense ends up being amazing, I'll eat my crow. But I fell for it last year. It didn't work, and now there's, to me, more known sort of warning signs where I don't really know what they're doing at linebacker. They got Holcomb, and then what? They don't have the three safeties to deploy like they did most of last year because Collins is gone. Maybe could they bring him back at a cheap contract? He's still out there. I mean, there's a number of different things they could do, but it just feels like such a weird situation to me on that team that a lot of those guys I'm just staying away from if it's not like Holcomb, Sweat, and Allen, really.
Yeah. No, I get that. I mean, in my argument that I would make on that is just that, it is going to depend on how healthy that defensive line is there, if those guys are able to perform at a high level or not. Yeah, that's one of the key things to this is, I'm not very impressed with their linebacking core either. I will say Holcomb has played pretty well, and he's been a solid linebacker. But I guess the good thing is if they get to the second level, there's going to be opportunity there for Cameron Curl, and I
Yeah.
think this defense is going to rely on him to make those tackles. So, for redraft purposes, you could see him being one of those high-end tackle safeties who, surprises because of the lack of the depth at linebacker and the presence at linebacker, and then even, defensive, line, if they're not healthy and they're not able to generate the pressure that we think they will, or contain, players, contain the run, then Cameron Curl's going to have to step up, and they're going to ask him to do that. And I think, that could yield some positive results for him in terms of fantasy value. So we'll see how it goes. You could probably make a case either way, for certain. You love to have a good defense around your players, but hey, you got to just kind of hope that those opportunities fall to him and he cashes in on that.
And it looks like he's sort of around that safety 18 range.
Ooh.
With Kenny Moore's the only one going ahead of him, but that feels
I like
a
that.
good spot to be getting in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say that I don't mind that at all because it seems like that's a safe floor sort of area. Closer to a back end DB2, but with that high upside where you feel like, all right, you're not just taking him at his ceiling.
Could you picture him being safety 12, finishing like safety 12?
Yeah, I could see this, and how realistic is it? Say, I'm making up a number here, but 40% chance of that. I'd feel good taking that there.
Yeah, that's solid. If you're turning your 18th safety into the, and you're cashing in with the 12th most points, I like it.
Yeah, I do too. And one name I forgot here, and this will be our last riser, unless Austin, you thought of any other ones. He was a rookie last year, and he saw some action, and he did all right. He was learning a new position. He was on a interesting team, to say the least. They got a lot better in the offseason, but Diabolo of the Raiders, linebacker, he was a safety in college. He was a big safety that just wasn't going to be able to play safety in the NFL. He's like 6'3", 225 out of Virginia Tech, and they transitioned him to linebacker. And what I was alluding to, but didn't bring up with injury stuff, is Micah Kaiser, who I think signed with the Raiders this offseason, is out for the year.
He's out for the year?
I forget what it did. Yeah, it was across the news, and of
no.
course my mind I forgot what happened to him, but it just came out he did something with his uninjured reserve.
Well, I will be honest with you. When you said his name, I thought you were going to allude to the fact that he was signed and maybe he could make some waves, and I was going to just say, forget it. And here we are.
Some sort of leg injury. And it really wasn't Micah Kaiser's going to start. They have Jan Brown. They signed, I think he was going to be one of the starters along with Perryman. And it sounds like Diabolo is at least working with the guys that are going to start. And he was, working a lot on his run defense, because if you think naturally, for the most part, college safety, switching to linebacker in the NFL, that's the biggest thing in run support. Even though he's got good size and certainly can tackle and hit you, you're learning that linebacker stuff. You're not going to do it all in 1 year. And by, a decent year, 45 tackles, not bad for a rookie that starts 5 games on the year and mostly a backup piece that, wasn't on the field for quite a few games on defense. So I like the profile coming out. He's been a willing learner. The coaching staff clearly likes him. And again, a guy that in most leagues isn't being drafted. And I'm not telling you to run out there and take him as your LB 3 or 4, but certainly a guy that if you're going to pick up someone late again, he's moving up the board for me with what he showed last year, and then that coaching staff having that increased faith in him and good reports out of camp. So how do you feel with him in that Raiders linebacker group?
Well, if he's a starter like he's projected to be, obviously that'll be good for him. Jayon Brown, though, I would think is probably at least going to get a shot at that. So it'll be interesting to see what the middle of that defense looks like. This defense is going to look a lot different this year than it has in years past. Obviously the addition of Chandler Jones, who's going to be on the field as often as he can be. Max Crosby, I thought, played really well, and I would expect more of the same from him this year. And then Denzel Perryman, who had an All-Pro year last year, he was a Pro Bowler, and I expect more from him as well. He's an older guy, but I could see, I'm trying to squeeze one more year out of him, similar to last year, in most of the leagues that I can get him in. I'm a big Denzel Perryman fan. So if Devon Diablo is able to see the field and secure a spot, and they're able to keep 2 linebackers on the field, at all times, that's a good thing for him. It's just I'm going to be interested to see how they deploy this defense with the addition mostly of like Chandler Jones, because that's a guy that you can't take off the field. Now you've added a linebacker. How much room do you have for more linebackers, whether those are edge rushers or guys in the middle of the defense? How often are you running 2 guys out in the middle if you're the Raiders? And what's that look like for Divine Diablo? So that'll be the interesting question that I have.
Yeah, and especially with that division that they're in, with how pass happy those other teams are projected to be. Decent running games, too, for 2 of them, with the Broncos and the Chargers, of course. But all 3 of them are looking to have high-powered offenses and be able to throw that ball downfield. And I think that's one of the things where if he's making strides in the run support, but also, doing all right in coverage, because of what he'd done in college, Diablo might have that leg up to be able to, like, all right, go out there and play a little bit of safety, or, do more in pass coverage than a guy like Perryman, who all the good that he does for you is like a 2-down, 3-down guy in run support and rushing the quarterback a little bit. He isn't that great in coverage out of the linebackers they have.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, well, we are going to get into the fallers to make sure we get to questions. If you guys have any, please make sure you throw those in the chat. But I want to remind you guys that we thank you for watching us on YouTube or listening to us in podcast form later. If you're over on YouTube, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed and turn on notifications so you get a little jingle in your phone or your pocket or wherever you are. You know that we're going live. You know that when the Devy show is on Thursdays, any of the shorts that are being dropped by Rick and Brad. And, of course, we have the Dynasty Heat Seekers tomorrow night. And I believe that's at 7 p.m. Central, which would be 8 p.m. Eastern, with Anthony and Bryce. So thanks again, everyone, and we appreciate your support. Fallers. So these aren't nearly as fun. This is where we get to be more of the Debbie Downers and getting excited about guys here. And I'm going to go to one that you put on here that I think a lot of people had a lot of hope for a long time. And I think some people are getting a little bit more hope because of the situation that he went to. But I'm sort of with you on this bandwagon. Jabril Peppers. I was never huge on him to begin with. Browns, quote unquote, gave up on him a little bit early, when they traded him for Odell, or in that deal. It wasn't a straight up thing. Giants had him. He had a good year there, and then, injuries sort of tailed off. And now he's to the Patriots on a 1-year deal. One of the interesting things, so, Belichick, he's a good defensive guy. Even in practice, they go hard. They play a lot of different positions with how in that secondary they deploy people. So what has you not feeling so great about Jabril being on the Patriots this year?
Well, I was a big fan of Jabril Peppers before he joined the Patriots. But, after joining the Patriots, I don't think that he's able to do anything to supplant Duggar as the strong safety on that defense. And then, opposite of him, you're going to have McCourty, who, he's aging, but you look at who you got behind him, and you got Adrian Phillips, who has played really well. He played extremely well last year whenever he was able to see the field. So Jabril Peppers, I think, is going to have more, surprisingly, return value and maybe special teams value this year than actual true safety value. Do I think he will see the field some? Yeah, I do, and I'd be curious to see how they use him. If they use Jabril Peppers as more of in more of a linebacker role. He does have the athleticism to be able to move all over the field and be effective. We saw him do that in college, and even a little bit when he was with the Browns. They were able to move him around and do some different things with him, and he was effective, and he did that well with the Giants. So. It'd be interesting to see how his injury heals up and what kind of ability he still has. He's not an old guy by any means, but sometimes those injuries can really change a player's trajectory. And so, you couple that with the fact that just from a depth chart perspective, he's going to have a tough time seeing the field. And he's probably going to be one of those guys who, this is why he landed on the Fallers list. You look at the numbers that he's produced in the past. I don't think he's going to reach anything close to that. So I'm moving him down on my draft boards, moving him down in my, rankings, if you will. And I think that, that's exactly what we'll see this year.
Yeah, I like your point about how they use him on defense is really going to matter, and I do think he is probably there more for that versatility on the obvious passing downs. But I almost wonder if you look at just like the size comparison out of the two of them, if they might use Duggar even more as to sort of that linebacker because he's got that bigger size, but also has that athleticism. He's a good 3 inches and I don't know, 20-ish pounds bigger than Peppers, which can matter, when you're playing up closer there. And, if they have Peppers out on a running back or Duggar on a tight end, something like that. Duggar's been showing really well in camp, sort of like we had expected. Pepper's usage is really going to matter, but I agree with you. I don't see him really being a full-time player this year, which kind of just kills his IDP value unless there's some sort of injury. And it stinks for a guy that there was a lot of promise of, but, he sort of just wallowed there in Cleveland for a little bit. People got excited about him going to the Giants, but he was hurt that first year, had a nice second year, and then, of course, last year he was just hurt most of the year. It's been an unfortunate trajectory for him so far.
Yep.
Alrighty. Moving on, we are going to go to a guy that we've talked about a good bit on this show before, but Kenneth Murray. So if you talk about how great that Los Angeles Chargers defense is, we sort of talked about on our defense show. Really good pass rushing unit. They shored up their defensive line with some offseason signings. That secondary has the chance to be one of the best in the NFL when you look at the high-end talent and the secondary pieces that they have. Their linebackers, if there's a question, that's where the question lies. It sort of looks like some combo of Kenneth Murray, who was a high draft pick himself. I think was around like pick 23 in 2020. They have Troy Reeder, was brought over as a free agent. Of course, he had been with the Rams for a number of years. And then Drew Tranquill, who had been with the Chargers for a few years too. And it kind of sounds like, at the moment they're trying out with Tranquill and Murray. It's training camp. You're going to have all sorts of different combos. Do you see Murray actually winning one of these starting gigs based on his draft capital and hoping that he gets there? Or is there going to be enough of a sense of urgency with this team and this defense where if he doesn't show anything, he's just going to end up being a bench player this year?
I think from a business perspective, I think the team will probably give him the first crack. Athletically, he has some gifts that, are impressive. He's very fast. He's very explosive. He does a lot of things well. The question is, what does his game look like up here? Is he able to recognize, offensive alignments? Is he able to be in the right places at the right time? Is he able to just be on the field doing the right things? And, I think that's one of the things that we've seen with Kenneth Murray, a lot of over pursuit, a lot of bad angles, a lot of just being in the wrong spot at the wrong time, kind of looking lost in the defense. All the athleticism in the world, but just hasn't quite figured it out at the pro level. Will this be the year that he does it? That's the real question. If he does, and honestly, you could probably really get some great value out of him. I mean, I'd be curious to know what his ADP is at linebacker, and see where he is. And I'm sure if he figures it out, he's going to finish probably higher than that. But he's just a guy that I'm not super confident is going to be able to figure it out. And with the defense that he has around him, I could almost see Troy Reeder being a little bit better of a fit where, they are not going to ask the middle of the defense to, do a whole lot in terms of getting to the quarterback and doing those things. They're really going to need those guys to just be there, make the tackles, clean up the plays, like make sure nothing gets, too far downfield. They've got a really great secondary who, should be able to lock down the offenses. And then you look at their front, defensive line. They've got some really nice pieces there with, the addition of Khalil Mack in the offseason, who, he's an aging star, but he's still, pretty effective. And then across from Joey Bosa, that's going to really help him a lot. So, that the secondary is going to give those guys just a split second more to try to get to the quarterback, knock them off their spot. But yeah, I just don't know how well Murray's going to be a fit in this defense. Like, that's probably my biggest concern. That coupled with the fact that he's just got to figure it out upstairs. If he's able to do, those two things, I think he'll be okay. But those two things are just so concerning for me, and I could really see Troy Reeder actually pushing him for some time. Although, Troy Reeder's not a guy that I'm telling you guys I would go out and target, because you're probably just going to get subpar play from him as well. Just very pedestrian fantasy results, just because of the way that he plays. But yeah, I'm fading Kenneth Murray again this year, and I think this is probably going to be the year that the Chargers go, okay, we tried. What can we do to move on from this situation?
Yeah, so it looks like, and again, this is all off of one or two sites here, but Murray's around linebacker 70, and this is not just your what do we want to call it? Traditional linebackers. It does include those edge linebackers. It's just anyone with a linebacker designation on here. So Murray's around 70, Tranquil's, like 3 spots behind him or so, so pretty close. And then Reader's down in the 90s. Um, if you're looking for big plays, honestly, if you're trying to take a swing at one of them, I guess Tranquil, athletically, in terms of being able to do a little bit of everything on the field, I would take a swing at him with where he's at. Where Reader's just going to be more consistently getting you tackles only, and Murray's just the ultimate question mark right now because they did, like you said, invest the most in him, but he's just shown nothing for whatever reason. And I know sometimes it's fantasy football. It's all, what have you done for me lately? If someone takes, even on wide receiver, if you go to the other side of the ball, used to say, oh, third year breakout. Well, people are expecting that first and second year breakout, and you're left for dead by your third year now is what it feels like. People are growing more and more impatient with this stuff. So maybe it will just take them a little bit more time. Some players it does, and that's where you can find the real value, whether it's a redraft league if you hit them on the right year, or dynasty hanging on to these guys a little bit. But that's where you got to make your determination on what are you actually going to get out of this guy. Is he going to be anything? NFL is really hit and miss on it. So, of course, we're even worse, fantasy football. But Murray wasn't the guy that I had that high even coming out. I was surprised at where he went in that draft initially. And it's not that I don't think he has the talent to do it. I just didn't like the fit with him there in Los Angeles. So hopefully they figure it out for him because I do like that team a lot. And that defense, I think, does have a chance to be special.
Yeah, I agree. I would say, being from Oklahoma and watching him play at Oklahoma, I don't think there's anybody who watched Kenneth Murray play that would say his athleticism doesn't jump off, the film or the page at you when you see it. But I also don't think anybody would push back too hard if you just said, I don't think he was ready. I don't think he was ready for the pros when he came out in college. I think he's a little underdeveloped, and I don't know that, I've seen him progress the way that we would like, especially with some of the injuries. So, yeah, those are the two concerning things for me with Murray. So we'll see how he does.
Another guy that's been a little bit concerning over his career here so far, and the wrong way, Devin Bush, sort of going in the wrong direction. He had a really good first year. It was sort of which of the Devons do you like the most? And that first year, Devin Bush, sort of won people over. And since then, it's been mostly Devin White, who was taken. White was 5th, and I think Bush was like 10th or 12th or something like that in that draft. Injuries have played a part of it, but also talk about a guy that it just maybe wasn't ready, for the NFL and what came with it after, that big hot start on the field. There's a lot of question marks with that Pittsburgh defense, I think, that have been in years past. Of course, you're going to have sort of the 2 stalwarts, 3 if you want to throw Minkah Fitzpatrick there secondary, but you got Watt, TJ Watt at edge linebacker. You got Cameron Hayward, and this is a lot of sort of just new pieces. They have Miles Jack next to him. Jack and Bush, of course, are really athletic linebackers. They're still both pretty young. What are you not liking about Bush right now? Because they're going to give him a chance, of course, with where he's drafted. He's going into his 4th year here. They got to make that decision on the 5th-year option because I don't think they've done that yet. Do you think he's just going to be sort of fighting for a long-term spot here? And, he's on your Fallers, so not that I have a problem with that. It seems like you're not too high on him this year. Do you like Miles Jack more than him?
That's funny because I wanted to put Miles Jack on this list. I'm just kind of unimpressed with the defense in the middle for the Steelers. I mean, Miles Jack, he was okay with the Jags, but he doesn't really do a whole lot of things for me that I just think are super great either. That there is one thing with the last guy we talked about with Kenneth Murray and now Devon Bush. These two guys have something in common. I think, they're both on rookie contracts, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Jack, I don't think so.
No, I'm sorry,
Jack
Devon
was
Bush.
a free agent.
No, Devin Bush and Kenneth Murray.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, they both are. Yep.
Yeah. So that's big. I mean, that's big for these two guys. This is the year that they've got to figure it out. They've got to come play. They've got to show that they deserve a contract. And at the end of the day, these two guys are going to be asking to get paid, asking to have a spot in the league still, right? Like their expectation is, hey, my contract's up. It's time for me to get paid. Whether that's there or somewhere else, who knows? It's going to depend on their performance. Obviously, these are two guys who I could see, being on the move next year. So heading into next year, if they get picked up, I'm sure somebody will pick them up. Wherever they get signed, who knows if that's a better or a worse situation? Who knows if they're even going to have a clear path to a starting job or if they're just being signed as a depth piece. So, yeah, I'm fading them this year. I'm fading them probably next year. Two guys who just haven't figured it out, and especially, for Devin Bush, I hate to talk about it, but the video that came out last year is just a guy who just doesn't seem to really have it figured out. Just kind of might need some, I don't know, some guidance, if you will, off the field as well, and that's something that you hate to see because at the NFL level, you've got to be able to perform on the field, but there's things you got to do off the field as well. You got to be dedicated to the game of football, and after last offseason, I kind of questioned that about Devin Bush, like, where's your head and what's priority to you right now? Is it football or not? It didn't seem like it was. So that's the biggest concern for me. And, ultimately just this defense, the way it's put together, the way they run, with TJ Watt being kind of the focal point of that defense, and the guy who gets the most pressure on the quarterback, the guy who's going to give you the biggest plays. I think that takes away a lot from the middle linebackers. Whoever it is, Devin Bush, Miles Jack, Joe Schobert when he was there. I mean, whoever it is, nobody's really given me anything, and there's nobody that's there currently that just makes me feel good and like I should target them. So I'm going to avoid them again this year.
Yeah, the thing with Bush, even he played, I think, there's at least one or two fewer games in his rookie year this past year. But if you look at the numbers, he had 39 fewer tackles and 2 fewer games. And that isn't, the be-all, end-all. It's about the same. It was 31 fewer solo tackles. So, I mean, most of those are solos. It just wasn't working for him last year. And he was coming off an injury. Again, he only played in 5 games in 2020. But there's been so many moving pieces in the middle linebacking core lately. It almost feels like Pittsburgh doesn't know what they're doing. And you talk about, he is a young guy. A lot of these guys sometimes they need a little bit more time to mature or something like that. He's 24 years old. And with a veteran team, or at least when he got there, it was a veteran team. I find it interesting that they weren't able to help him sort through that, at least to this point, and get his head on straight and his priorities. Some guys just can't or won't or whatever it is. But the talent's there. He was high draft pick. He had a nice career in Michigan. Makes me wonder, kind of to your point, what's really going on there? Is it just not a fit? Does he need to change his scenery, which maybe he'll get after this year if he's not brought back in that 5th-year option? Or is he just not someone that's going to get there? And we'll find out this year for sure, because I don't think Pittsburgh's really going anywhere. And it makes me wonder if with another bad year, after the last year, if that's just going to make things even worse and they're going to move on from them.
Yep. Just press reset, sign somebody, draft somebody, whatever they need to do. He just, I will say he hasn't lived up to his draft capital, that's for sure. I mean, they took him 10th overall. So, they have to be pretty disappointed with that.
All right. And the last one before we get into questions here is sort of a grouping, and it's an interesting team. It's going to be a good team this year, despite me being a Cowboys fan. I'll admit Philly's defense really has some exciting things going on, and the offense is getting all the hype naturally. But they have competitions sort of across the board, really, outside of their secondary. They have TJ Edwards, Kaiser White, Nakobe Dean, and then Davion Taylor. It's sort of that grouping of linebackers, and there's going to be 1 or 2 odd men out depending on how they go with it. Usually there's at least one guy that you can count on out of that group for IDP production. And then even the defensive line, they have Josh Sweat, Derek Barnett, Fletcher Cox, Hargrave. They got Hassan Reddick, who they got as a free agent, sort of be more of an edge guy. Generally speaking, there's sort of more of a 4-3 base defense. So you're thinking probably 4 of those D-line/edge guys, and then depending on how many guys are playing the secondary, 2 or 3 linebackers. Of course, whoever's out there on the linebacking group, you have a really good shot at just getting good production because of how the team is set up and how they run things on the defense with linebackers getting the bulk of those tackles. Too early to say for sure. Dean's running with the threes right now, which we kind of expect for a third round linebacker with, some health concerns. But do you have any sort of vibe on what you're getting out of that linebacker group and who you expect to be the odd man out?
Yeah, that's a great question. To your point, they do run a lot of 2 and 3 linebacker sets. So they're running 3 linebackers. My expectation would be, T.J. Edwards, Kaiser White, and then the question becomes, is that Hassan Reddick? Is he the third linebacker, or is it Nakobe Dean? Are they just walking him up? So it's going to be interesting. One of those 3 guys, it's Kaiser White, T.J. Edwards, and Nakobe Dean, in my opinion, are the 3 front runners to be the linebackers. But it's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out. Like Nakobe Dean, I mean, the good news is they didn't invest a lot of draft capital in him. They got him much later in the draft than a lot of people thought that he would go. So, I think that works out really great for the Eagles where, I guess technically they really don't have to rush Nakobe onto the field. They can just kind of sit back, watch, see how the game's coming to him, see how quickly he's progressing, how he's picking that up, and see if he's ready to make a move into the starting lineup. I guess that's the way it shakes out. Kaiser White was really productive, both in terms of fantasy, in terms of fantasy and in terms of like actual NFL production. I expect him to really shake up the defense and really it's going to be hard to keep even as well as TJ Edwards has been playing. So these are 2 guys who have been playing really well for their teams, and now they're on the same roster, and it's going to have to sort itself out how it's going to go. I'm going to kick that one back to you. I will talk through some of the other interesting positions that I'm seeing on here. The big one to me was the addition of Hassan Reddick. Because now you've got, the veteran presence of a guy like Brandon Graham and, Fletcher Cox, who we know they're aging, but right behind them, you've got the young guys, like, Josh Sweat. Now you've added Jordan Davis, who I think is, going to be, who knows? He may get it's too early to tell, but he's the kind of player, in my opinion, that could be like, this guy's going to get a gold jacket. It's just a matter of time. So we'll see. I don't want to jump to conclusions, but he's that kind of talent, like when you watch him. So I am really excited to see what he does. You've got, Derek Barnett on that defensive line, Javon Hargrave, and then behind them too, another guy that I'm going to throw in that mix is Milton Williams, guy that they were really excited to get last year in the 3rd round, who was a really talented prospect, and I kind of expected to see some playing time this year. So it's interesting to me how they added to the defense, where they chose to go, because they already have so much depth at those positions, and then you look at their secondary, and it's like, they add James Bradbury and Darius Slay, and then outside of that, for me, it's kind of like, whatever. So interesting to see how they put that defense together. What's your thoughts on how it works out in terms of defensive line and linebacker?
So the defensive line, it's almost like I don't want to touch any of them. If I have to, I shouldn't say it, outside of Reddick, and if he counts as a defensive lineman in your league, I don't really want to touch any of them right now because, one, with that depth, they're going to use, they did before, a heavy rotation. They're going to continue to do that, which is great for the NFL. And when you have that much talent, you probably should. It keeps them fresh. When you're a pass rusher, you're going to be able to get to the quarterback more. And on those rundowns, whether it's, Cox, who's sort of transitioning more to that at this point in his career, or Jordan Davis, there's those big run hole pluggers, have them up there, spending their effort on that, and then switch out to the pass rushers. It makes more sense to do that for real life. For fantasy, it's not exciting at all. And I think, to your point about Davis, he never really played 3-down role when he was at Georgia, and I don't see him just immediately falling into that right away in the NFL. It's difficult to do that in college, and then you're switching to a bigger competition. Long term, I certainly think he could do that. My comp was a guy who I don't think is in the Hall of Fame, but he certainly had a heck of a career. Ted Washington, just another huge guy that could move when young in his career. Does Davis have that ceiling long term? Certainly. I don't think you're probably going to get it this year. And the defensive line as a whole, most leagues, I don't think they're going to have utility just based on how they're rotating. Linebackers, it's a different story because they really haven't done those big rotations. And I agree, whichever one or two, if they are mainly keeping 2 of them on the field there, as far as closer to that 3-down role, there's going to be value. I think it probably should be White. Edwards is the guy that's been there, more, and Taylor was competing for a starting spot last year before he got hurt, and I know they really like him. It's one of those where it's really hard if you're drafting now to make a decision on what you want to do, but the good thing is having that risk of that rotation or someone just not making it pushes all of them down. The guy being drafted the highest right now is probably White off of what he did last year, and then it's probably Dean just because of how people get excited about rookies this time of year. And I wouldn't be drafting Dean personally in a redraft league just based on most of the time rookies don't hit for you in IDP leagues. And the guy that's third-round pick on a team that's looking to contend, I have a hard time seeing him being a starter to start the year off. And if he isn't, don't draft him. Most redraft leagues, you don't have huge benches. If you think he's going to start later on in the season, if someone's stinking it up or whatever, put a waiver claim in later on. Don't waste a draft pick on him. Just be my advice.
I am like 100% behind that. And that was kind of my point. The guy with a third round capital, they bought themselves some time to let that work itself out. And we see it every year with rookies. I mentioned some earlier, all the Andre Siscos, the Richie Grants, different position, but kind of the same thing where you look at those guys and you go, man, they're really talented. Surely they're going to get some playing time. And then, nope, they don't. They don't even get a chance. So second year could be different for Nakobe Dean, but at least for this year and redraft purposes and then based on his draft capital, which I think is one of the most important, and then just the depth that they have there, I see no reason for them to rush him into that rotation. Jordan Davis, however, I do think is in a little bit different situation where he holds that first-round draft capital. He's such an exciting player. And then you've got these guys who are aging like Fletcher Cox. I could see them having more urgency to get him into the rotation. Not necessarily to just have him out there every single down, but to really work him into that rotation a little more. I could see them giving him more priority and urgency than a guy like Nakobe Dean.
Yep. I think that's going to do it. We don't really have any questions. I want to give some shout outs here. We had Josh. It has been a night. Jaz and Mr. Scampers showing up in the YouTube chat. So thank you guys, and Ryan over on Facebook throwing a comment in here too. If you have questions for us, our Twitter handles are down here. You can jump in the Roto Heat Discord. You can go to Facebook. We're all over the place. So please let us know if you have any questions, even the offense stuff. We'll answer that as best as we can. We're going to be here with you guys at 8:30 p.m. Central Time up through the 29th. That is 4 more weeks after this, and then the season is going to be starting pretty much week and a half after that. So we won't be going live during the season because as much as we know you guys love watching us, you probably love watching Monday Night Football a little bit more. And you can still catch our written articles, and we'll probably be dropping some shorts. We might be doing the waiver wire videos again, too, for you to throw on here if you have questions about waiver wire pickups. We got stuff cooking for you guys, and you can catch all of that over at rotoheat.com. Austin, any parting words you have for us for tonight?
Nope. Just thanks for joining Mr. Scampers and Jaws. Both of you guys, we see you in here almost every week, and we just appreciate you guys tuning in. Love some new faces, like you said, Ryan hopping in here and chatting with us. So, we appreciate you guys stopping in, and you guys have a great show or a great week. I'm just reading the comment here from Mr. Scampers. No problem, man. Thanks for joining us. Out there. Yeah, he's awesome.
That's going to do it for us. Again, tomorrow night you can catch Anthony and Bryce on at I think I said 7 p.m. Central Time. That'd be 8 p.m. Eastern for the Dynasty Heat Seekers. But that's going to do it for us. Brad, hopefully we'll be back next week. We'll see if he's out of his swimsuit at that point with an umbrella drink or not. But we know that he's relaxing and having a good time. So we'll catch you guys next week, and have a good night.